Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called Transcend Inherited Trauma, Somatic Practices for Nervous System Resilience and Intergenerational Trauma Integration. My name is Stephen Dunn. I'm the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I'm really blessed to be with you here because we are in a time of so much outer chaos and tumult, and what that does is bring a lot of trauma to the surface that really needs to ultimately be addressed as part of our own journey of wholeness. So we're going to get some really powerful tools and insights for how to work with some of those deeper patterns as they surface or that you notice in your life for any other reason. We get to explore that with one of the preeminent pioneers in this work. Her name is Manuela Mischke-Reeds. She's an MFT, somatic trauma therapist, Hakomi trainer, and founder of EmbodyWise. And she's also the author of many books, and they're very robust, coming out this year. She has trauma sensitive movement workbook that's coming out. There's a somatic psychotherapy toolbox. And then by the end of the year, she has embodied psychedelic therapy coming out as well. So very prolific time, and really couldn't be better timing in terms of giving us tools to navigate these deeper trauma fields that are so present behind a lot of the challenges that we're facing now. So thank you, Manuela, for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Delighted to be here.
We'll start today's journey with a little bit into your journey in working with intergenerational trauma and why this work is really so important now.
Yeah, I didn't really have a choice. I grew up bicultural in Germany, actually. And, Germany has quite a history of intergenerational trauma, and I was kind of steeped in it without even knowing as a child. And because I was brought up, or I am bicultural, and I had an unusual family background, I always had a kind of an awareness that there was something else being moved through me and imprinted into me. And I was also at the time as a child and young adult doing a lot of movement practices and meditation practices at a young age. So it allowed me to kind of have experiences where I felt like, what is moving through my own body? And then later on, when I studied psychology, I came across Hakomi and then started to teach Hakomi and studied movement therapy and all kinds of different other therapies. I discovered that I had all these inherited family patterns and societal patterns, and then the intergenerational trauma from my ancestors really literally living in my nervous system. And I started to also see that in my clients. And so I began to get very interested in what are these patterns? How can we recognize them? And how can we work with it in a skillful way? So it's not just a mental experience, becoming aware of these imprints, but actually how to recognize them in the body and then how to process them through. So that's why I started to teach this work, because it was very personal.
How do you start to discern what's our own sort of just kind of everyday patterning versus really inherited patterning that sort of transcends our particular lifetime?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It has to do with learning at first about what is our somatic direct experience? What am I feeling, sensing in this moment? So there is a way of learning about our own bodies. We have often a more functional way of being in the body. We go from A to B, or we exercise our body, but we don't really use our body as a technology. And I really use that word quite deliberate, that it is a technology. So we need to learn how to get quiet, how to listen, how to discern normal tension patterns of normal stressors versus patterns in the body that are linked to a powerful emotional material, family material, or themes that we carry. So intergenerational trauma, for example, could be if you're coming from, a background of trauma, and we know that trauma is imprinted 12 generations through epigenetics, and I'm going to talk about this in this course actually, that there are certain emotional and somatic templates that get inherited down. So feelings of, for example, feeling powerlessness or feeling fear constantly, although there is no particular fear stressors in the environment, having a chronicity of responses all the time, even though the stressors are maybe not what they should be. So there's a way that we begin to understand these patterns as like, wow, maybe I carry something from my family, from my ancestors that I didn't even realize. So it often comes through tension patterns. So tension patterns, holding postures, gestures, even how we verbalize certain expressions, how we interact in the world, what we're not going towards and what we're shying away from. So, for example, if I'm growing up feeling constantly a sense of doom or feeling unsafe all the time, but there's nothing really in my world that's threatening me, where does that come from? How did I get to have this belief system and then somatic pattern that shapes around it? Where did I get that from? Right. So for me, for example, coming from the culture that I came from, I felt this incredible shame, even though I didn't grow up in a family that was shame-based, but I felt shame about my culture or feeling proud of who I was. And that was a direct intergenerational trauma inheritance from the culture and the imprints that I grew up in. And it wasn't only until I moved away from my own culture and lived in other cultures that I began to have enough distance and began to see, oh my goodness, I carry a lot of cultural shame. And it showed up in my body in certain patterns. And so that's when I began to study it and understand it and then work with somatic tools to free myself from that.
You say that these can carry on for 12 generations. So that's a long time back. I mean, it's three,
Yeah.
400 years. So maybe you can share a little bit about what tends to work to alleviate those patterns or start to shift them so that we're not continuing the chain onto a next generation.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. We do want to do that kind of work. So because we're also then impacting the next 12 generations going forward, right? So whatever we do, whatever we become conscious of, how we embody in our own life and the actions that we take in our own life have a direct impact on the next generation. So what they found out, and this is really for Holocaust studies, and Rachel Yehuda was one of the researchers kind of doing this landmark study, and I will teach on this in the course, but they found out that there are markers in our DNA basically that get inherited when there's trauma, unprocessed trauma. And so we carry these imprints through the legacy. We don't even know 12 generations back. I don't know my ancestors 12. Do you? I mean, I don't know who these people were, maybe on paper, but we don't really know who they are. But you can see certain familial emotional patterns, behaviors, even the kind of jobs people choose, illness patterns, autoimmune issues, for example. There's a direct correlation between trauma and autoimmune health and imbalance. So you can track certain illness patterns, family patterns, emotional patterns, relationship patterns. You can start tracing them through the generations, and a pattern does emerge. Substance use or abuse, for example, all these kind of factors come into play. So, trauma is not just a mental health issue, it's also a physical health issue. And so when we begin to become aware of, like, how did my ancestors live? What choices did they make? How did they eat? How did they live? What did they choose? How did they deal with hardship? We begin to see, oh my goodness, I'm doing something very similar. And when we become aware of these patterns and how we're perpetuating something that we've been unconscious about and become conscious, we begin to become awake to these patterns, then we can have a choice, right? Our ancestors often didn't. They didn't have that kind of those teachings or the insight or even the luxury to even dive into these explorations, but we can. And so we have a lot more knowledge now. And then when we become aware and awake in our own bodies, then we can make those shifts. And part of that is learning how our nervous system has been impacted and how it's impacted every single day. How do I respond to stress? How do I respond to a stressor? What do I do when I'm faced with stress? And we all have different patterns in which we engage in. And what is my habitual way of doing it without even thinking about it? And that's a big clue. That's often where we start. So we start with what we're habitually doing already, and that begins to unravel and show us also a pathway into these deeper patterns. And dream work comes into it. Where often when we begin to do this work, dreams get very active. We become attuned to our intelligence of our body, and I call it the whispers of the soma. So suddenly we have these insights and awarenesses that come forth, and we go, wow, I didn't even realize that. So perception shifts, reference points shift, insights come, and they come literally from the soma up. It's not something we think, it's more like it arises.
That makes total sense. I'm wondering if it seems like a lot of the patterns that we would have inherited would have been adaptive at one time, but then stop being adaptive. So it's like it's an attempt for your body to respond to stressful circumstances. I wonder if you want to share anything about that framing of kind of understanding these as sort of maybe like once useful but no longer useful kind of perspective.
Well, they're always useful, even in this life, right? Our responses to stress are always useful, and even in our lifetime, they become no useful anymore. So, what if we had an abusive household that we grew up in, and we learned how to freeze all the time, which is a wonderful adaptive strategy to not get the wrath from maybe a violent family member, for example, to be freezing and withholding and withdrawing our own life force is a very good coping strategy. But 20, 30, 50 years later, it's not so helpful anymore. And this is where we don't thrive anymore. But we're so ingrained and entrained in our nervous system to respond to stressors. Maybe every time I feel a stressor or I'm faced with some adversity, I'm going to be freezing. So that then gets my body stuck in a certain pattern. It also then gets me stuck in a certain thinking pattern. So my body freezes, right? I feel threatened. Then I'm going to have certain thinking patterns. I'm not safe. I am not this. I'm not that, right? And that then reinforces also my somatic experience. So my nervous system is entrained. And so it is adaptive and it's helpful for when there is a stressor, but when I want to thrive in life, it's not. But that journey to let that go is very difficult because we build identifications around it. We think that's who we are. And that's been one of the discoveries that I've had with my clients I've been a therapist for 30 years and a teacher of psychology for 30 years. And the understanding in the body is actually easy. Even recognizing the belief is easier. But the identification, living in fidelity to those beliefs and those somatic imprints is really hard to change because we build an identity around it. We think that's who we are.
So if we try to work on just the identity level first without the somatic underpinnings, it's probably unlikely to shift, it sounds like.
No, you cannot. You can have all the insights in the world, but if you don't work on your body patterns and the nervous system, and we know that now this has been well documented now, you can't just think your way through it. You actually have to feel and sense and move and work through the emotions, all of the whole human experience. We have to bring that on board in safety and resourced,
So I'd imagine a lot of the stress responses in a kind of somatic level are kind of layered on top of, they're almost like a defense against what's underneath. So how do you work somatically to kind of get beyond the surface pattern, the kind of freeze to like what's underneath as an example?
Well, you always start with where your consciousness level is at. You always start with what you got. And there is no right or wrong way, really. It's you start with what's your direct experience now? What are you aware of? So this is a key inquiry. And so then you say, oh, I'm aware of this tension in my neck. And then we also begin to unpack, oh, the tension neck, what do you notice about it? And then people often go into story, right? Oh, it's because I worked out wrong. Oh, it's because, we usually try to go for easy explanations. But part of working directly with our somatic experience is let go of the story that you make up right now, which could be true. Maybe you worked out and you have a stiff neck, that's fair. But let's let that be for a moment. And let's also feel what's actually happening with that tension. What else do you notice about it? So we begin what's called a somatic accessing. So we're accessing the direct moment in this moment. And then we're unpacking it. And what couples in is feelings, other stories, memories, because our body holds memories. And people are often very surprised, and it's kind of a descent into our soma. Now, we do that with a lot of resources. We do that with taking pauses, with feeling grounded, because we don't want to go into these stories of the body and feeling and going to a re-traumatizing kind of process. That's not what's interesting at all. So we want to kind of understand what's living in our tissues, in our fascia, in our nervous system, but we also want to resource the body while we're doing it. So taking breaks, thinking about it, bubbling back out of the body, understanding what we have the understanding now, going back into the body. So it's kind of a layered process in which we're having a direct experience, then we make sense of it, then we reflect about it, then we maybe have an exchange, then we go back in. So it's a very resourced process, and that's really important. Because if you're just going into the body without any of those scaffolding, we can get easily overwhelmed or misinterpret the cues of the body or get very stuck or have a re-traumatizing experience. And that's not what we want to have happen.
a lot of nuance in going in there, and
There is.
so maybe it'll also be good for people to understand a little bit about this concept of post-traumatic growth. Like,
Yes.
what's the power on the other side of doing deeper dive?
Yeah, post-traumatic growth is a resilience. It's both learning how we can, because the thing is that trauma is a fact of life. Trauma happens. And it's not that we have trauma and then we get rid of it. It's actually a befriending process. And so as we're learning the impacts of trauma, we're learning tools of how to be with it. So maybe when I'm feeling a freeze come on, I go, oh, I'm noticing it now and I have choices. Trauma feels choiceless, and trauma processing begins to increase choices. So then what will begin in post-traumatic growth is I have no choices. I can still feel the threat, but now I have tools at my disposal. I can do something. I can do a breath. I can do a movement. I can talk to somebody. I have certain routes that can work through my body. And that's what this class is about. I'm teaching a lot of tools, very hands-on practical tools. So the choices open up, and post-traumatic growth is building a kind of resiliency that I have the choices. I have also a capacity to be with the stressors. No longer do I have to just respond to a freezing response. I have other responses at my disposal. And there is a recognition that my trauma perhaps even has wisdom to it. And that sounds almost like, opposite to what trauma is. But the truth is that every traumatic experience has a gift. Now, we don't start there. That'd be also not really acknowledging the hardship and the struggle that trauma brings. But as we're going on this journey of befriending our trauma history, our story of our ancestors, what we've been impacted by, we're also going to be discovering, oh, wow, the previous generations, they had a lot of grit and resiliency. They overcame a lot of struggle. They created all this beautiful life, even though they had so much trauma, because a lot of trauma survivors are incredibly resilient. And so we're kind of fostering the resiliency more and also have an appreciation for the difficulty. And so when we're working with trauma, it's not about getting rid of, it's actually enlarging our capacities and also appreciating the journey of the trauma recovery and integration.
It's a very empowering perspective. I know you're gonna guide us in a little experiential so we can start to apply some of the insights you're talking about. But do you want to talk a little bit about what are some of the key principles as we move into movement patterns that help to surface this kind of befriending of our deeper traumas?
Yeah, I mean, what we're working with is really learning to read the body so that we're beginning to understand what is overwhelm, how can I work with my stress, what are even stress responses, how can I regulate. We're working with safety all the time, and this is really important. I want to stress it over and over again because a lot of harm has been done actually when people go too quickly into their trauma stories without enough understanding of how to ground and resource. So this is a very important principle of learning grounding techniques and also understanding that the body and the mind are completely interconnected and that there's always a self-agency. So just because we're working with these are powerful ways, right? So working with the body directly will bring up material. And so empowering each person to have also self-agency, that they can pause, they can talk about it. It's not like a one size fits all anyway, but there's also a way to scuffle through those experiences. So that's really important. So safety, resources, grounding, working with appropriateness of the material, and really going at their own pace. Those are really important principles to work with.
Great principles to keep in mind. So do you want to lead us in experiential to take people into a little taste of this work?
Sure. And will you be a guinea pig?
Sure.
Okay. So having said like working with resources, let's start by, and it's better for me if I guide you because then it's like I'm talking to you students and it's easier for me than just in the ether here. But find a posture that feels grounding to you. If it's like you settling into your sits bones or into your feet on the ground, tell me what you use to ground your body first.
Feet on
Maybe
the
you can
floor,
feet on the
butt more
floor,
solid in the chair.
solid in the chair. And are you leaning into the chair?
A little bit, but I think also just being a little more vertical.
Okay, vertical, so you can
something.
feel the vertical axis, beautiful. Yeah, feeling the vertical axis, and you can even feel the sky above you and the earth underneath you. Those are also very grounding forces. Feeling the feet is a nice way. And if you'd like, I invite you to very gently do a kind of walking in your shoes, as if you're like pushing with one foot in the ground, letting go, and then push the other, as if you're like literally walking. Yeah, so there's a little bit of a subtle shifting side to side happening as you're doing that. So as if you're taking these gentle walking steps in your shoes or your socks, whatever you got there, feeling your foot making contact as you press into it, then release, and then put the other foot in. So you might notice there's a gentle pivot happening in your pelvis as you do that. And perhaps, yeah, and I notice you just took a deeper breath, Stephen. Beautiful. That's exactly what you want. So you have a deeper breath, perhaps in your belly or your chest. So that's your parasympathetic nervous system coming on right now. And then do that movement until you feel like, oh, that feels good and it's enough. And tell me when you got that.
Feels good.
Feels good. Okay. And then as you're feeling that good feeling, notice anything in your body where you perhaps hold a tension. Perhaps your neck or your
It's kind
shoulders,
of on the right side of my back neck.
right side of the back of the neck. Okay. And at any time, we can come back to those resourcing feet. So that's always available. But notice that tension in your neck and allow your awareness to travel there. And then notice anything about it, perhaps a texture or quality. What do you got?
Notice it sort of feels a little less palpable sensation through there versus the other side.
So it's a little bit more numb.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's very different than the other side. So for a moment, because we're working with these patterns, for a moment, let's just assume that this is some pattern perhaps from the past. Let's just take that leap for a moment and treat it as such. Let this be a gateway, something that your body remembers. You just took a nice deeper breath. And if you're focusing on that area, you can even ask it, what are you remembering right now? What's this tension remembering?
Yeah, it's definitely connected. I had a mountain
To
biking accident that kind of landed over the handlebars and kind of landed in that area on my neck
Hey,
and
so
back.
your body remembers an accident. Okay. So allowing that to move through you as you're feeling that accident. But don't get hung up on the story per se, but just go, oh, thank you for remembering this. And you can even say, thank you for helping me. Probably you braced, I imagine.
Hmm.
And so thank that area, keep thanking it, and treat it as a gateway even deeper. What else do you remember through this gateway of the tension in the neck?
Hmm. A little bit of like embarrassment or maybe self-judgment around just not being more careful.
Okay. Yeah. So an emotion, feeling the embarrassment. And then again, just see if you can bring an attitude of thank you for showing me that. What else do you remember tension? What else do you want to show me?
Kind of a feeling of helplessness, like being
Mm-hmm. Helplessness. It's a kind of vulnerability there. Yeah. Allowing that to be there. Keep unpacking it. What else wants to be shown?
and some this kind of loneliness too, like because I felt like first I was biking with it gone way ahead, and so I was kind of just having to deal with the bike and the crash and everything without anyone there.
Yeah. So feelings, aloneness. Yeah, you're with this horrible accident by yourself. Yeah, and a helplessness, real vulnerability there. And then notice what's happening in the rest of your body as you're remembering this. Are you still in touch with your feet? Let's bring that resource back.
I was noticing like some little twitching in my feet.
Okay, so allowing that, let the body respond, let the body twitch. There can be a discharge, letting that happen. Sometimes the body responds with little jerky movements or twitchiness. Yeah, you're doing a little body shifting, letting that happen. And let's see what the soma, what else it wants to remember. Again, we're not getting hung up with the story per se, but we're just opening up what else wants to be known.
I'm feeling a physical pain too.
In the neck or other areas?
Yeah, it's just kind of just radiating down from the neck and back.
So if that's okay, Stephen, allow that pain to be there. Again, another layer. We're just like peeling the onion here a little bit, letting that layer be here. It's physical pain, and just see what that pain needs. Perhaps it needs a breath, a little movement, perhaps the feet again. What's that pain need?
And it just feels like some attention.
So more tension
Notice,
coming up?
no, just attention, like notice.
Attention. It's attention. Okay, it needs attention. So what kind of attention? So see if you can give that kind of attention. So now you're getting a direct message from the body. I need attention. So let's see what kind of attention the body needs. Sometimes there's a breath. You're doing some deeper, slower breaths there. Sometimes there might even be an invitation of a tiny movement, maybe even right next door to where you have that. Yeah, there you
Yeah, I
go.
was feeling my kind of like circling my shoulder. I
Nice.
think I got kind of
So,
frozen in the.
aha. So the medicine was coming through. So you felt the frozen and now the shoulder. So make it so small that your body can accept it, that this tension can accept it. So doable, so small. Applying that little movement in the shoulder. Yeah, a little circular motion. Following that movement and noticing what happens as you do that. Another breath. What else happens now?
Feeling a little more calm.
And is it safe to say that this area is a little bit more available?
Yeah, I can sense more sensations in that
Sense more
area.
sensation. So the numbness is different now. So it's not that kind of, it's not so, yeah. Okay. And let's ask it, just because this is an exercise here, but let's ask this whole area being more available with the movement, more calm. If this area could talk to you right now, from the past to now, what would it say to you?
I mean, what's coming is more like take time for healing.
Take time for healing. Go with that for a moment. What kind of time?
Yeah, I just know I notice a little wave of sadness around that or something. Like I often think I feel compelled to kind of focus on whatever the next challenge, next whatever is, rather than prioritizing time to just let certain things
Yeah.
heal too.
Yeah, beautiful. So your body is giving you a direct message right now. Take time to heal. Make room for that. Make time for this, right? There's always another challenge. There's always another something. And then the body says, take time. So let's just listen. Tell yourself that message. Take time. Or you can even say, it's okay for me to take time to heal. Just see what happens as you give yourself that message. I like that sound.
Yeah, this is something settles with that message.
Nice. And where does it settle to?
Just feel my breath deeper in my belly, and there's
Beautiful.
like some tension around breath kind of relaxing too.
Nice. Beautiful. So you have now successfully coupled in a deep innate resource right now in the belly, that deeper belly, settling into the belly. That's a deep resource. So feel that. So connect that deep resource you just found with the neck. And you can just go back and forth, just very gently noticing the neck and that story you've been working on in the background about the accident. Don't even call it up much, but just have it in the background. And that deep settling belly in the breath. It's okay to take time to heal. Hmm. Yeah, how does that land?
Yeah, feels it feels significant and important.
Beautiful. Okay. So is it okay if we pause here and I decipher
Yeah,
this for a second? That's great. Thank you for being game. It's great. It's so much better when I actually have a real life person in front.
yeah.
What you did is I didn't tell you what to do. I didn't tell you what the intelligence of your body was or where you needed to go to do a deeper resource. You discovered that because you connected with your direct experience in your body, right? We started with a gateway of attention that led you to a memory. And then we were unpacking it somatically versus just telling me the story about it. Remember that I didn't ask a single question about the accident per se, why, what, where, how, right? You gave some cliff notes, but it was really about what was your direct experience of it. And then you started to have messages from the body. And then this beautiful, deeper breath arose from the belly. And this little mantra, right? It's okay for me to take time to heal.
Hmm. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's really touching me. I feel a little tender just going into that
Yeah,
actually. So
of course, it's
yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, and that's exactly it, that tenderness, right? That it needs that tenderness, that vulnerability. And thank you for sharing such a real story, because that's exactly what this work is about. We're going into real body stories, and it's right there. And the tension is often the gateway. What do we usually do with tension? We want to push it away. We want to, you could have also given me like, oh yeah, it's from an old injury from my bike accident, and you could have brushed it off, right? But you had the courage to actually examine it and go into that vulnerability. And that's exactly what it takes, is that tenderness, that vulnerability. And then these messages from the body, this technology of body comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have done that. I couldn't have told you, well, go here, go there. This is, I just asked you the right questions and guided you to your knowledge.
Yeah, so it's kind of strikes me in hearing that it's like that we create these stories as kind of like a distraction or overlay, and so if we're stay in the story, then we can't actually get to the deeper wisdom in there.
Exactly. Stories are identifications.
Mm.
And they're helpful to make sense, but trauma doesn't make sense. Just like you were falling off a bike and embarrassment, and your friends are going further and all this stuff happening, it doesn't make sense that you fell off. You can say, okay, there was a rock, or you can have all kinds of explanations, but in the experience of the body, it doesn't make sense. And that's true for all kinds of trauma. It doesn't make sense.
Mm.
You can find the reasons, but that's usually us from our head trying to create some kind of meaning. But in the actual processing of trauma, we need to let go of that. And that takes the tenderness and vulnerability that you so beautifully demonstrated here.
Mm. Also
Yeah.
kind of strikes me that sometimes some of the new paradigm perspective on sort of always finding meaning can be a distraction from just the unraveling you're talking about too.
Yeah. And meaning arises, meaning comes. We're meaning making creatures. It's not a problem to have meaning. But if we identify too much with a meaning, we also get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
We need to update our meanings, right?
Hmm.
Especially past traumas.
Now, what would you recommend sort of in terms of like continuing this process or unfolding it over time in terms of what, just as an example, what it just did with me?
Mm-hmm. Well, now that we found that beautiful resource in your belly, for example, if next time you have the neck pain, you could say, oh, let me connect it with my belly resource I just found in my statement.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to take time. So maybe this could be an area, if you have stress in your life, you might be habitually kind of clenching in your neck. Often when we have those kind of physical injuries, there's a vulnerability often then when there's stresses or tensions in our lives to go to old injury places. And we kind of do these mini re-injuring re-injuring of them. So they become these chronic places we go to. So neck is one, belly is one, often chest is one, right? Shoulders, those are classic places. But we go habitually there. But when you next time notice, oh, my neck is getting tight, you go, oh, wait a minute. I can say, it takes time. It's okay for me to take time. Maybe you'll take an extra breath, and then you couple into that deep belly resource that you have. Be very interesting if you then apply that, right? Because you have first found a somatic pathway in the body, and it's yours. You discovered it. I didn't tell you that. You discovered it. It's yours. You will remember this now.
So each of us has kind of like these somatic tools that are more unique to us, that sounds like, and then you kind of use those for unravel the different levels of trauma
We
patterning.
do. We do. We all have those. We all have these somatic pathways. And the beauty is when we discover it, we will remember. But if I tell you, Stephen, go here and jump on your foot 3 times and do this, I'm giving you instructions and your mind will try to follow it. But it's not really coupled with your bottom-up, soma-up experience. Now you have discovered it. It's now in you. It's a pathway that you own. And it's different, you know?
That's an interesting point. So in some ways, like trying to tell people a pattern from the outside is sort of like the overlayering we do with the trauma to begin with.
Yeah, it's like when you tell your children something, you want them to do something, la, 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 right? But if they discover it and they discover the play, or they own the experience and it's theirs, that's now a memory. Well, it's because it's a novel experience. And the way our brain is organized, we learn through awe, we learn through novel experiences, new experiences, and that's when we remember it. So in this work, we also need to engage this kind of awe and wonder, because that's the novelty feature of our brain, and then we remember it. And that's the direct counter to trauma memory, because trauma memory is so dominant, because evolutionary, we're wired towards having trauma memories because for survival. So when we're doing healing, we also need to go towards a little bit of magic and awe and wonder, because that is the counterbalance to it.
I noticed when you were guiding me that at one point you were sort of saying or something about letting the movement be a little smaller, or sort of like, and maybe share a little bit more about that, because oftentimes maybe the tendency is to want to sort of exaggerate something.
Exactly, because the head goes, oh, let's make it bigger. I found something. No, the idea is then to go smaller, because what you're doing is you have to be more mindful and you have to be really with it. And I noticed that your breath, and I commented on your breath, right? That was my reflection back to you a lot, because you started to take these deeper breaths. That tells me that you're actually metabolizing, that you're processing through. So the breath is a huge indicator. And the slower we go, the more present we are with the experience, and we're presencing what arises. If we're too fast, if we're doing a movement, we're overriding and we're becoming very achievement oriented. But if we're actually going slower, I have to really be with that little circle. And then I notice, oh, there's a connection this way and a connection that way. And oh, there's a somatic opening here. And suddenly all these pathways in the body begin to open up. And that's where the magic comes in. So slowing down, making it more bite-sizable, more presencing of the experience is really the magic ingredient here.
Well, Manuel, it's so great to have your wisdom and insight into all these subtle nuances that really make a big difference in how we unravel some of the patterning that we have, and in a way that's really honoring the value of it too. So it's sort of befriending it rather than just trying to get rid of it.
Right.
And so I really appreciate your wisdom on this. So let's talk a little bit more about how people can go further with you and really learn and apply these powerful techniques. So we're very blessed that Manuela has agreed to teach a brand new course that's going to go deeper into what the subjects we've opened up today. It's called Transcending Inherited Trauma, Somatic Practices for Nervous System Resilience and Intergenerational Trauma Integration. You can find it at the URL transcendinheritedtrauma.com, transcendinheritedtrauma.com. It's a 7-week program, and there are no prerequisites for this, although obviously Manuela is speaking at a level of psychological and somatic sophistication, but it's also accessible to those who don't have specific training as well. So Manuela, I'd love for you to share a bit about your intentions for this program and what people will come away with, and then we'll just go for the modules and share what you'll be teaching.
Yeah, and I love that you just said that. I mean, so much of my teaching is often to mental health professionals, and I'm really excited that this course is really for everybody. I really would like this course, or my intention for this course is really to show people, just as I did with you, that there are nervous system patterns that we can work with, recognize in ourselves, and that we can apply some of these techniques for our own self-healing. And it's really important at this time. We have so much stressors coming our way right now from so many directions. And intergenerational trauma is really the inherited patterns, as we talked earlier. And so they get activated when there are new stressors in our lives. So if it's your work situation, your current family situation, whatever, the world climate, whatever it is, whatever stresses you out, those are all triggers into the nervous system. And so chances are that these old nervous system patterns then get triggered. And that's both, of course, difficult, but it's also an opportunity to then step into, let me see what's getting unearthed and let me work with it. So this course is very hands-on. I'm going to teach tools every single time. I give obviously a talk and things like that and give a frame. But then it's really like, okay, let me guide you through this practice and then have people try things out. So it's very practical. And at the end of these 7 modules, you're walking away with literally a toolkit, that you can apply in your life. My ideal is that students walk out and go like, I have a bunch of tools that I can actually use in my life and apply when stress comes up.
Great stuff. So module 1 is called Foundations of Intergenerational Trauma, Somatic Healing, and Nervous System Resilience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where we lay the foundations. What is intergenerational trauma? We talked a little bit about it, but I go more in depth about it. And also what's somatic healing, giving a frame around it. And then also some education about what is nervous system resilience. What is our nervous system? How are we organized? There are some very basic templates that are really helpful to understand. And once we understand, we also see, this is a normal response, because often people blame themselves. I have, the freezing response. I get always so aggressive, or when I withdraw or avoid. And people take it very personal. And then when they learn this, they go, this is actually how we're wired. And I said, yeah, if I be in your situation or would have had that kind of experience, I would have responded the same way. So there's a kind of normalizing and understanding how we are built as human beings, as mammals, in our nervous system. And that's what this foundational module is about.
Module 2, The Body Remembers, Ancestral Imprints, Somatic Patterns, and Immune Health.
Yeah, and this is where we're going more into the memory, like what are some of these memories in the body? How does the body remember? What are some of these imprints? And then we're also going to look at some of the illness patterns. And as I said earlier, there is a direct link with autoimmune health. And so many people, in particular women though, have autoimmune issues. And so we're going to look at what's the link between trauma imprints and autoimmune health.
Module 3, Rebuilding a Felt Sense of Safety and Belonging for Nervous System Healing.
Yeah, so once we understand, there's been these imprints, I've identified some of them, then we're going to work with how do we build safety and belonging. So this is a very important part of this work, which is about grounding, resourcing, feeling safe in our own bones. This is really critical. So we can't really transform anything until we feel safe. So this is a lot about how do we keep ourselves safe and grounded, and how do we work with our nervous system.
Module 4, Meeting Shame and Fear as Gateways to Healing and Embodied Emotional Integration.
Yeah, and that's just as we were working with your attention as a gateway, we can also work with shame and fear as a gateway. Shame and fear, and I picked those two because those are the ones that nobody wants to really work with. Go, oh no, I don't want that. But it's actually the most transformative place to go to. So after we've set all these prerequisites there in module 1 through 3, we're ready then to tackle with some of the more difficult places, which is fear and shame, and really understand that we can befriend some of these experiences. So that's a very powerful one, working with emotions here.
Module 5, Beliefs, Identity, and the Stories We Carry. Find a sense of profound freedom by rewriting your internal narratives.
Yeah, so once we understand these emotions, our somatic patterns, then we can begin to look at what did I start believing about myself, about others? What did I begin to identify with? And what was the impact of that? What did that narrow down? And so we're beginning to understand the narratives that we've been carrying and beginning to start looking for what can I rewrite about my narrative? What are some of the beginnings of that?
Module 6, Rewiring Resilience, Creating New Neural Pathways for Embodied Empowerment and Post-Traumatic Growth.
This is where we experiment a lot. So we're working with, now that we have worked with shame and fear, we have the safety there, we have identified the stories that we carry, then we're looking at, okay, what is the resiliency out of this? What are some of the new pathways that I'm discovering? and what is the post-traumatic growth. So this is where we begin to kind of do a flip on the trauma into what is post-traumatic growth and discovering that.
And finally, Module 7, Integration, Embodiment, and Legacy Work, Honoring the Past, Living the Present, and Shaping the Future.
Yeah, and that's often a misunderstood one because most people stop at the last one. Okay, I'm rewired now. But actually, what's important is integrating all these experiences and then honoring. There's an honoring of ancestral work and honoring the past that I've lived and my ancestors lived, recognizing how it's shaped me, and then also what is my self-agency carrying forward? What can I and do I want to carry forward, and what do I need to leave behind? So this is also where we're going to talk about the use of ritual, personal ritual, writing, certain practices, where we're kind of setting also boundaries around what do I not want to carry forward anymore? What do I not want to be from my ancestors? What do I not willing to do anymore? So that's about shaping the future and revisioning ourselves from the trauma into the growth and thriving.
What a beautiful program, and it couldn't be better timed in terms of the level of collective tumult that's triggering a lot of people's traumas right now. And so, again, it's all at transcendinheritedtrauma.com. So if you choose to move forward with this course, you'll get not only the 7 90-minute live sessions with Manuela, which are going to be also very interactive and include time for you to ask your questions live. You also get recordings of every session, both video and audio, as well as word-for-word transcripts to work with, study, and highlight. There's weekly exercises and practices that you can do at home. There's a Facebook community to support you and deepen your experience. And on the page, you'll also see a number of extra bonuses that are designed to enhance your journey. There's an inner body dialogue, a somatic self-inquiry healing for healing. This is a PDF guide and interactive script. Want to share a little bit more about that bonus, Manuela?
Yeah, so in the course, I'm doing quite a lot of scripts. So like I'm teaching little protocols because these are take home. And this is basically what I did with you, where I was guiding you. This is now a dialogue that I wrote out that people can do for themselves. So it's basically translating a little bit what I just did with you, and people having a little bit of a template that they can go through this inquiry.
Great. Well, that's a great extra bonus. And then there's a second bonus. It's a PDF excerpt from Trauma Sensitive Movement. They're called 5 Somatic Practices for Healing and Resilience.
Yeah, those are practices from the new book, which is focusing on how to work with movement and trauma in a particular way. But I don't remember which ones are going to be offered now. I can't remember. But those are 5 practices that we're kind of offering from the book is brand new. So yeah, just came out.
Okay, great. Brand new teachings there in the book. And finally, there's one extra bonus you get if you sign up by midnight tonight Pacific time. And this gives you a little extra incentive to tune in now and read through the page at Transcend Inherited Trauma and really make your decision now. You'll get a special bonus for doing so. It's micro movements for nervous system resilience. This is a PDF and guided audio practice. Manuela, want to share more about that special bonus today?
Yeah, so micro movements, those were taught to me through Continuum. These are very powerful movements that you can work, especially with freeze responses. So when there is an emotional freeze, a physical freeze, those are very powerful technique to unlock that and help the nervous system to kind of recalibrate. So that's a very potent tool.
Great extra reason to sign up right away. Micro movements for nervous system resilience. So it's clearly going to be such a profound program. It's really gives you powerful tools to meet your deeper traumas and unfolding in a way that's really really quite empowering and liberating. So we've kept the investment very accessible for the program. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you can save 10% when you pay in full with one payment of $349. The course is going to start May 14th and run Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. But even if you can't make the live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings and the transcripts in the community as well. Some great testimonials on the page from people who have studied with Manuela before through shift programs. Manuela is a powerhouse teacher, facilitator, and therapist. She fully embodies what she teaches and is a much needed leader in somatics and trauma. I find her wildly inspiring. Love that. So there's like some other great testimonials. But you're really in great hands. Manuela is very seasoned, 30 years in this work, and really has some of the most profound insights and practices that you will find. So again, there's more detail on all of these things at transcendinheritedtrauma.com. And if you remember, if you sign up by midnight tonight, you're going to get that special bonus on micro movements for nervous system resilience. So Manuela, we're nearing the end of our time. Really profound insights, and thank you for the personal work. I feel like I got like a therapy session here today. And so really thank you for just, I think also just the loving nuance you bring to this work. And so anything that's still on your heart you want to share with folks who are considering doing the full course with you?
Yeah, I was just reflecting as you were talking that, I usually teach so much to mental health professionals, and this is one of the first times I'm teaching it to a wider audience, actually. So I don't do that often.
Hmm.
And so I occasionally do it, but I don't do it that often. So this is actually an opportunity. Some of the material that I usually teach to professionals, and this is really for everybody, and that's dear to my heart because I do feel a sense of urgency in this time that we live in right now, that we all have these tools. It's not a luxury in my mind. This is actually something that we need to thrive and not just survive. I think that even in difficult times, we can thrive. And working with our own soma and understanding the imprints of the past is not, it doesn't have to hold us back or has to be a curse or anything. It actually can be very empowering. When we realize where we came from, what we've inherited, we also inherited a lot of gifts, a lot of strength, a lot of grit, a lot of beauty. So I want people to also feel like when working with trauma, by the way, can be very fun. Usually when I teach, we have a lot of laughter. And part of that is that it's the absurdity of pain and suffering lives right next to the beauty and opening and magic. So I hope that this is an invitation to understand trauma as actually a force towards thriving.
Hmm. I love that. It's such a great empowering reframe to sort of see how those all strengths we can access if we just sort of
Yes.
open to a deeper kind of relationship. So really beautiful and empowering wisdom today, Manuela. Thank you for your time. Thank you all
Thank you.
for joining here today. And if you'd like to go further with Manuela into her brand new course, again, the title is Transcending Inherited Trauma, Somatic Practices for Nervous System Resilience and Intergenerational Trauma Integration. And all the details are at transcendinheritedtrauma.com. And you get the micro movements bonus when you sign up by midnight tonight. So thank you, Manuela, and thank you all for joining. Many blessings.
Thanks so much, Steve.